While everyone is fighting over overpriced starter homes, there's a hidden real estate market where you can buy a massive historic building for just $115,000. Across the country, historic churches are being sold for pennies on the dollar to anyone willing to take them on. But we aren't just showing you the beautiful stained glass. We're going to break down the brutal zoning laws, the insane heating costs, and the structural nightmares that come with them. Here are 5 abandoned churches you can actually buy right now for under $200,000. Starting off in Oswego, New York, for $160,000, you can own this massive 1873 historic church. This property sits just blocks from the Oswego River and features incredible original architectural details from the 19th century. When you step through the heavy timber doors of this Gothic revival structure, you are instantly transported back to the 1870s, an era when Oswego was a booming port city funneling goods across the Great Lakes. The wealth of that era is physically baked into the walls here. We are talking about 3,216 square feet of completely open, unobstructed sanctuary space sitting on a prime 0.38-acre corner lot. The masonry alone, if you were to try and replicate it today, would easily cost over $2 million. The original arched windows, the soaring heavy timber roof trusses, and the painstakingly detailed woodwork throughout the nave were all crafted by master builders over a century and a half ago. Demographics in Oswego have shifted significantly since the boom years, leaving grand structures like this one underutilized and struggling to find congregations large enough to maintain them. The local zoning allows for a variety of adaptive reuse projects, making it highly attractive for ambitious developers looking to convert a historic asset into a unique modern residence or community space. From a purely historical and architectural standpoint, paying $160,000 for a structure of this magnitude seems like the ultimate real estate steal. But here is the brutal reality of living in Oswego. The city gets hammered with over 140 inches of lake-effect snow every single year. You are positioned right on the edge of Lake Ontario, which acts as an endless moisture engine from November through March. Heating a massive, uninsulated 1873 sanctuary with 20-foot vaulted ceilings in one of the snowiest cities in America is a thermodynamic nightmare. The heat from your furnace will immediately rise to the top of those gorgeous wooden trusses, leaving the actual living space at the floor level absolutely freezing. To counteract this, owners often run massive commercial boiler systems constantly. Because there is virtually no wall insulation behind the plaster, the thermal bleed is astronomical. Heating this building can easily exceed $3,000 a month in the dead of winter. If you attempt to insulate the massive interior walls, you risk destroying the historic aesthetic that made the building valuable in the first place, forcing you into a lose-lose battle against the brutal, upstate New York elements. Beyond the crushing monthly utility bills, you face an even more immediate existential threat. The sheer weight of 140 inches of annual snowfall places immense stress on a 150-year-old roof span. Modern engineering standards for snow loads in this region are incredibly strict. You will also be forced to immediately reinforce the historic roof against extreme snow loads or risk a catastrophic collapse. Engaging a structural engineer to retrofit the timber trusses with modern steel tension ties and upgrading the entire roofing system to bear the weight of heavy, wet lake-effect snow is not a minor cosmetic fix. It is a mandatory structural intervention that could easily wipe out a $50,000 renovation budget before you even begin thinking about drywall, plumbing, or interior design. Moving over to Dexter, Maine, this 1872 church is currently listed for just $149,900. It features towering stained glass windows and stunning original double entrance doors that give it incredible curb appeal. Constructed during the height of Maine's post-Civil War textile boom, this classic traditional wood-frame church served a vibrant local congregation for generations. The building's exterior showcases the quintessential New England ecclesiastical aesthetic. Crisp white clapboard siding, a sharply pitched roof designed to shed heavy seasonal snow, and tall, narrow Gothic-arched windows that flood the sanctuary with natural light. The interior volume is breathtaking, offering an expansive, open-concept floor plan that modern residential developers can only dream of. Beneath the main sanctuary, the property even boasts a partially finished basement area, complete with a full kitchen setup and basic bathroom facilities, hinting at its long history of hosting community suppers and town gatherings. It is a magnificent piece of 19th-century history, situated squarely in a quiet, picturesque rural community that has seen significant demographic shifts since the decline of the local woolen mills. As the town's population contracted, maintaining such a massive structure became financially unfeasible for the dwindling congregation, but buying a massive building in a rural town of under 4,000 people comes with severe infrastructure downsides. When you transition a historic building from occasional weekend religious use to full-time residential or commercial occupancy, the burden on the property's underlying utilities changes dramatically. In major cities, you simply connect your pipes to the municipal grid and pay a monthly water bill. Here, you are entirely off the grid when it comes to waste management. Rural Maine towns frequently lack the tax base to support sprawling municipal sewer networks, placing the entire financial burden of wastewater treatment squarely onto the individual property owner. Because there are no robust municipal sewage hookups, you are entirely responsible for the property's septic system. The existing septic infrastructure was likely designed decades ago to handle light, intermittent usage, a few hours on a Sunday morning. It is almost certainly entirely inadequate for the daily volume of a modern family home or a boutique commercial enterprise. Furthermore, environmental regulations regarding wastewater disposal in rural Maine have become incredibly stringent. If the town's code enforcement officer determines that the antique leach field is failing or undersized, you cannot simply patch it. You must excavate and replace it entirely. This is where the rural real estate dream crashes into reality. Installing a modern, environmentally compliant septic system requires extensive soil testing, civil engineering plans, and heavy earth-moving equipment, depending on the soil percolation rate and the water table depth on this specific lot. A standard gravity system might not even be legally permissible. If the historic tank fails, a brand new engineered mound system will immediately cost you upward of $15,000 before you even start remodeling the interior. That is a massive, unrecoverable capital expenditure buried directly into the dirt, entirely invisible to future buyers, yet absolutely critical if you ever want to legally flush a toilet or run a washing machine in your historic masterpiece. Any budget you allocated for restoring those beautiful stained glass windows will vanish into the ground the moment the plumbing inspector arrives. Our absolute cheapest property on the list is this 1921 church in Cleveland, Oklahoma, priced at an incredible $115,000. Built during the 1920s oil boom, it features classic red brick construction that looks like a fortress. Cleveland, Oklahoma, holds a legendary place in the state's petroleum history, having erupted into a bustling boomtown following the discovery of the Cleveland sand oil field in 1904. By the time this church was erected in 1921, the region was flush with wildcatting wealth, and the local architecture reflected that sudden prosperity. The congregation poured their resources into building a substantial, permanent structure, Unlike the fragile wooden chapels of earlier frontier days, this building was constructed using multi-wythe brick masonry intended to stand as an unmovable anchor for the rapidly expanding community. The heavy masonry walls, the austere parapets, and the grand, imposing facade convey a sense of absolute permanence and structural invincibility. It is a massive, visually impressive property that offers an enormous amount of raw square footage for a staggeringly low asking price. Decades after the initial oil boom faded, properties like this remain as monumental reminders of an era when local wealth flowed freely from the ground. But that brick construction is exactly where the nightmare begins, because Oklahoma has some of the highest tornado risks on Earth. Cleveland County is situated directly in the heart of Tornado Alley, an atmospheric battleground where catastrophic supercell thunderstorms and violent EF4 and EF5 tornadoes are an annual, terrifying reality. When you purchase real estate in this specific geographic corridor, structural resilience against extreme wind shear is not an abstract engineering concept. It is a literal matter of life and death. You cannot afford to live in a building that cannot survive a direct hit from extreme cyclonic winds, and unfortunately, vintage brick is highly problematic in this regard. While the 1921 brick walls look incredibly sturdy to the untrained eye, historic unreinforced masonry is notoriously brittle and catastrophic during extreme wind events. Historic masonry churches like this lack the modern structural ties required to withstand high wind shear. When a tornado creates rapid pressure differentials and extreme lateral forces, a modern timber or steel-framed building is designed to flex and transfer those loads safely to the foundation. An unreinforced brick building from the 1920s cannot flex. Instead, the roof acts like a sail, lifting upward and pulling the unsupported brick walls outward, causing the entire heavy masonry structure to explosively collapse inward on the occupants. Bringing a century-old brick church up to modern life safety codes in Tornado Alley is a monumental engineering challenge. You must essentially build an entirely new steel exoskeleton inside the existing brick shell to anchor the roof directly to the foundation. Retrofitting a 1921 brick building for severe weather compliance is incredibly expensive, and securing standard homeowners insurance in Tornado Alley could be nearly impossible. Without proof of extensive structural retrofitting, insurance underwriters will likely flat-out deny coverage, leaving you entirely financially exposed the next time the storm sirens begin to wail. Any savings you gained by purchasing a $115,000 property will instantly evaporate when you receive the engineering bids for structural steel bracing. At over 200 years old, this 1822 church in Lisle, New York, is currently on the market for $120,000. It is one of the oldest surviving structures in the region, featuring early Greek Revival elements that predate the Civil War. Constructed when Thomas Jefferson was still alive and James Monroe was president, this extraordinary building represents the very genesis of formal American civic architecture in upstate New York. The heavy timber framing was likely hewn by hand from old-growth forests that no longer exist, locked together with intricate mortise and tenon joinery and wooden pegs. The facade boasts classic Greek Revival symmetry, characterized by its prominent pediment, stark white exterior, and stately proportions meant to evoke the democratic ideals of antiquity. Inside, the sheer volume of the historical sanctuary is deeply awe-inspiring. Decades of community history are embedded in the worn floorboards and the massive, hand-carved pews. For an architectural purist or a historian, acquiring a continuously standing 1822 structure for the price of a cheap modern sports car is a deeply intoxicating prospect. Local historical societies often hold these early 19th century buildings in high regard, which can sometimes unlock specialized grants, but the preservation restrictions attached to those funds can make modernization exceedingly difficult and highly regulated. But a 2-century-old structure means you are dealing with an 1822 rubble stone foundation. Before the invention of modern Portland cement and standardized cinder blocks, rural builders constructed foundations by digging a deep trench and stacking local, unshaped fieldstones. They held these irregular rocks together with a soft, breathable lime-based mortar. Over the course of 200 grueling New York winters, the relentless cycle of freezing and thawing soil has exerted immense hydrostatic pressure against these subterranean stone walls. When soil freezes and expands year after year for 2 straight centuries, the structural integrity of a loose stone foundation is inevitably compromised. This constant geological assault inevitably causes the lime mortar to turn to dust, allowing groundwater to pour freely into the basement. More critically, as the mortar fails, the heavy fieldstones begin to shift, bulge, and bow inward under the massive weight of the church above them. Fixing bowing walls or water ingress in a massive historic rubble foundation requires specialized masonry work that standard repair companies simply will not touch. You cannot just spray modern concrete over a rubble wall. The trapped moisture will rapidly accelerate the structural decay. Modern impermeable cements will trap water inside the porous historic stone, causing the entire foundation system to essentially shatter from the inside out during the next winter freeze. Instead, the building must be painstakingly jacked up and supported on massive steel cribbing. Then, highly specialized historic masons must manually excavate the exterior perimeter, dismantle the failing sections of the 1822 stone wall by hand, and reconstruct it using historically accurate, breathable lime mortar, all while installing a comprehensive modern exterior drainage system to permanently divert the groundwater. This is incredibly slow, dangerous, and highly skilled labor. Stabilizing the base of this church could easily cost you $40,000, entirely blowing out your renovation budget. You could spend a fortune on structural excavation and find yourself with absolutely zero visible improvements to the actual living space above. Finally, nestled deep in the Catskill Mountains, we have this 1894 church in Halcottsville, New York, listed at $175,000. It features highly ornate Queen Anne detailing on the bell tower, making it look like it was pulled straight from a fairy tale. Built during the late Victorian era, this architectural gem showcases the eclectic and highly decorative style that defined the Gilded Age. The exterior is a masterclass in asymmetrical massing, featuring intricate fish-scale shingles, deeply textured wooden siding, and a steeply pitched, complex roofline that immediately draws the eye upward to the stunning, multi-tiered belfry. Inside, the sanctuary is lined with rich, dark beadboard paneling and illuminated by magnificent, vibrantly colored stained glass windows that bathe the interior in a warm, ethereal glow. Located in the picturesque, highly desirable Catskill Mountains, a region famous for its breathtaking natural beauty, robust tourism, and close proximity to New York City, this property seems like the absolute perfect candidate for a high-end, boutique vacation rental conversion. Countless urban investors have eyed these rural properties as lucrative cash flow opportunities, imagining a trendy, highly photographed Airbnb getaway nestled in the serene mountain landscape. But the Catskills real estate market holds a dark secret for investors hoping to fund their renovations with Airbnb income. Over the past decade, the explosion of short-term rentals has drastically altered the demographic landscape of these historic mountain towns. Long-term residents have faced severe housing shortages, while quiet residential streets have been transformed into revolving doors for weekend tourists. In response to this intense localized pressure, municipal governments across the region have aggressively cracked down on out-of-town investors seeking to commercialize residential properties. Town councils and local planning boards have instituted labyrinthine regulatory frameworks specifically designed to severely limit or outright ban new short-term rental operations. Commercial zoning restrictions in these tight-knit mountain communities often strictly prohibit short-term rentals. You cannot simply buy a historic church, throw some trendy mid-century modern furniture in the sanctuary, and list it online. Changing the official use of a 19th-century religious assembly building into a commercial transient lodging facility requires navigating a grueling, hostile, and highly publicized municipal zoning variance process. Every neighbor will have a legal right to dispute your plans at a public hearing, and they rarely hesitate to voice their absolute opposition to an influx of transient weekend renters. You will be required to submit expensive architectural plans, commission detailed traffic and parking impact studies, and stand before furious town hall meetings to defend your project against organized opposition from local neighbors who vehemently despise short-term rentals. The local code enforcement officers will scrutinize every square inch of the historic structure, demanding prohibitively expensive commercial-grade fire suppression systems and ADA-compliant accessibility upgrades before even considering your application. The reality is that the regulatory deck is entirely stacked against out-of-town developers. If you buy this expecting to run a boutique church Airbnb, the local zoning board will shut you down on day one. You will be left holding a $175,000 mortgage on a massive, unrentable historic building, trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare with absolutely no viable path to generating revenue. Keep in mind that we are not financial advisors or real estate agents, and buying abandoned properties carries immense financial risk. Always consult with a licensed contractor and local zoning officials before purchasing any historic building.